Hey everybody, welcome to Marriage Moment. Stop calling it Marriage Moment Monday because we're on YouTube and you can watch it anytime you want. So maybe it's Friday and you're watching it. It doesn't matter, just glad you're watching. So we are taking these moments on Marriage Moment videos to apply the word from 1 Corinthians 13 that we are discussing or talking or teaching on Sunday mornings in the sermon series called What is Love? Where Paul takes some time to not define love, but give the application of love. And for today, the word in 1 Corinthians 13 is jealous. Love is not jealous. Mm-hmm. And the context that Paul was using there's two things to think about. One, the word that he uses literally means to burn or boil over with envy or anger. And it means that it makes a comparison. So I think jealousy, we talked about this yesterday in worship, that jealousy always starts with a comparison. You look at your life and then you compare it to something else. Maybe something you see on TV or social media or someone you know, and you compare those things, and then you see something somewhere else and you want it. You want what they have, you want what that is, and it begins to become an obsession and it burns inside of you. You boil over. So what we're going to do today is try to do our best to talk about how do we apply that scripture that love, genuine love, is not jealous, is not boiling over with envy, is not making a comparison. How does that relate and how does that apply in our marriage? So you had some thoughts. You want to start?
Yeah, so if we're saying that jealousy is comparing, we need to start out with realizing that our marriage is unique to us because it's me and you. And so I would not compare our marriage to anyone else's in any way, even in a good way, like my parents' marriage or your parents' marriage or somebody that we look up to. We could see them as a model for our marriage if we want to look down the road and something that we want to have in our marriage later on that we're working on. But we should not ever compare our marriage with any other marriage.
You said something that I think is exactly right, and we hadn't talked about it. Your marriage is totally unique because the two of you are totally unique, and if you compare it to your parents' marriage or your grandparents' marriage, well, they're not you.
Right.
And they haven't had the same experiences, they haven't had the same background, the same pains or victories in life, and so all those things have shaped who you are, and so your marriage is totally unique. And so if you see somebody's marriage that you kind of think, well, I wish ours was like theirs, it's totally unrealistic and it sets you up for failure because you're not like them. You haven't had their experiences, you haven't had their backgrounds, you have yours, and so you have to learn to make the best of that.
Yeah, and you may be in a different season than that other marriage.
Absolutely.
There's so much at play in that, so just don't compare.
It's just kind of a waste of emotional energy.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about was just the trap of, you call it compare book.
Yeah, it should be called Jealous Book.
Jealous book.
Yeah, I think when we look back in our life and our marriage, there was a moment that we realized looking at Facebook all the time and anything on social media was starting, at least for me, it was starting to cause me to feel depressed, and it automatically made me compare, even though I knew that what I was seeing in Facebook was maybe not always the whole picture. Because it's just a little snapshot of something going on in somebody's life. I don't know the whole story. I don't know their pain. I don't know their struggles. I just see this great thing on the picture. And when I decided to just stop, I just deleted it and I never looked at it again. Even though it has some great things too, great applications, I just had to stop it for me. And when I did, it was so freeing. And I don't have any of that envy and jealousy burning because I'm not even looking at it. It's not in my face.
Yeah, it's good.
So it was one of the greatest things that I decided to do.
What else?
So we've talked before about in marriage, one of the greatest gifts we can give our spouse is to believe the best when there is a moment of having to decide why, or like an explanation of why your spouse did something.
When expectations don't meet your expectations, when reality doesn't meet expectations or behavior doesn't meet expectations, instead of jumping to the worst conclusion, you choose to make the best assumption until you can't anymore.
Right. And
Believe the best.
Right. And so I think believing the best, if we've been able to start learning to do that in our marriage, it's the opposite of just automatically becoming jealous and believing the worst. Jealousy makes you do that, I think. And so we want to see that as their opposites. And we don't want to do that.
Yeah. One of the things that I see, or used to see when I did more counseling, was couples kind of competing with each other. And that it's easy to fall into that trap of believing that your spouse is your rival. That when they do something good, you kind of get mad because, well, what about me? Spotlight's on you. Why isn't it on me? And part of showing love without jealousy is not seeing your spouse as your rival. You're a team in the eyes of God. As a married couple, you're one person, and so when your spouse succeeds, your marriage succeeds.
Yeah, if you see yourself as a team. And something we read said this statement, it was very profound to me, that love delights in the welfare of another. So in a marriage, that means I'm excited when something great happens to you or you've accomplished something. Instead of us competing against each other, if I'm showing true love in our marriage, I would delight in that for you.
Yeah, your spouse is not your rival. That's just a hard way to be married.
Yeah.
What else?
So we talked about this just a little bit as we were getting ready for this, that sometimes just because of someone's past, they bring in some baggage to the marriage that would cause jealousy to be an issue.
Okay.
Sometimes we may not even realize that we're doing it. And this was true for our marriage. I brought in some baggage from my parents' failed marriage, and there was an affair. And so if there was ever a moment or a question of anything that you were thinking or doing, I automatically went there in my mind that you must be having an affair, and had this just burning jealousy that I had to deal with myself. It wasn't your fault. It was baggage that I brought into the marriage, and it was hurting. I remember looking back and thinking, that hurt our marriage, and I just had to wake up and deal with that myself. And I had to give that to God, and I had to realize that you were not that person, that had nothing to do with you. And
that was a
unfair.
comparison you were making. You're comparing our marriage to your parents, and you were comparing me to your dad.
And it was unfair. It was hurting you. When I realized that it was hurting you, and that I could be that same person too, that I could do the same thing. I could make a mistake and betray our marriage. I had to realize that I was hurting us doing that. And so when I stopped, I gave that to God.
So jealousy in your marriage might be coming from just some baggage that you brought with you that you haven't dealt with yet.
Yeah. And that's something that you have to give to God and let Him help you work that out.
For sure.
So this other statement that we read is very profound too, that love is intricately linked with contentment. And that's talking about in our marriage. And so when we thought about, well, what do we do if we find out that we're in a marriage that we're struggling, one of us is struggling with jealousy, both of us are struggling with jealousy, what do we do with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. What's the application if that's you today? If jealousy is a part of your marriage and it's part of the stuff you're struggling with, what do you do? How do you handle it? How do you love without jealousy?
So I think it goes into that statement that it's linked with contentment. We have to teach ourselves to make a list, if it's just in your mind or if you're actually writing it down, of all the things that you're grateful for, the things that you have to be content for.
And I think we talked about this last week, but contentment is like a muscle. If you don't use it, it shrivels up, and then it really hurts when you use it the first couple times. But the more you learn to do it, the stronger it gets, the easier it gets. You just have to, it's a skill you have to practice. It's a muscle you have to exercise. Learning to be content. And it can be as simple as just starting a list.
Yeah.
Write them down. Send a text to your spouse. Here's something I'm grateful for today, or here's an area of contentment in our marriage today.
Yeah, and it has to be daily. It's something that you have to
choice.
Teach yourself to choose to do, to look for what you can be grateful for. And I think a big one that we probably just skip over and don't even think about is praying and ask God to help you stop being jealous. You know, maybe you've come from a home where while you were growing up, maybe a parent was a jealous parent, and you've just let that become who you are, and you don't even realize you're doing it. Some of that stuff, you're just going to have to give that to God and ask Him to help you stop.
And then the third thing is one of the points from yesterday's message is you have to do whatever you have to do to eliminate comparison from your life. Do whatever you have to do to eliminate the comparison trap, to stop comparing yourself. And for us, that was social media. It might not be that for you. It might be a relationship. It might be, who knows, it could be
TV
anything,
show.
a television show.
Movie.
There's so many things that can cause you to compare and then end up in jealousy. And I would just say your marriage is worth whatever sacrifice you have to make to eliminate the things that want you to compare.
Yes, because it's your most valuable possession.
Without question. Okay. Well, that's the lesson for today, that love is not jealous. It doesn't boil over with envy, and it does not compare. The next one, next week. It'll be fun. See ya.